Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So this morning we are going to be discussing from chapter 2, contents of the Gita summarized, where we've been discussing how everything is here in the second chapter, and then the rest of the Gita goes out and explains, unpacks all the important points. Krishna reiterates them to Arjuna so that he understands to the best of his capacity, which is an interesting discussion. And then we know that Krishna says, now, Arjuna, you do as you like, do what you want to do, now that you've heard everything. So there's no force involved. The independence of a living entity is always there. So Krishna's answering Arjuna's question, what is a person who's fixed in transcendental knowledge, such consciousness? How does he act? How does he sit? How does he speak? What do we do? How will we wreck such a personality? Because that's very important. You know, the whole process of spiritual development is to gain association with those who are Krishna conscious, because they can connect us through this process of bhakti yoga, the connection ultimately with the supreme personality of Godhead, and also the reconnection of ourselves in relationship to the supreme personality of Godhead. So this can only be understood by someone we know. Tadviti pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekyanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshina. Just try to learn this truth, this knowledge, by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because he's established, or he's seen the truth, he's established in that truth. So Krishna is the Adi Guru, he's the original Guru. Arjuna is the disciple, the student, inquiring from the Supreme Lord himself as to how we can gain this knowledge and become firmly situated in this truth. I was listening to Srila Prabhupada yesterday. He says that this is fact. This is fact. So nobody's how would we say it? Srila Prabhupada's determined, fixed consciousness was there, that it becomes just like in the 9th chapter we hear this similar thing from Krishna. He says that this knowledge is the king of education, it's the most secret of all secrets because it gives direct perception of the self. How does it give that? By realization. So it becomes a fact. So Srila Prabhupada would say, this is actually the fact. People are speculating in this way and that way and this thought and speculative things, but they're all, they're all open to comment and open to possibilities of not being true. But Srila Prabhupada would make it very clear that this is actually the fact, the absolute truth. So how to do this is being explained by the Supreme Lord, and he's answering these questions. What are the symptoms? Is the question of those conscious thus merged. How does he speak? What is his language, etc.? The Lord says, a man who gives up all varieties of sense desire which arise from mental concoction, they're not actually real in one sense. They've been created, figments of our imagination. And when his mind finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he's said to be in that pure transcendental consciousness. One who is not disturbed in spite of the threefold miseries. We discussed that last week. And the threefold miseries are always with us. The Adi Bhautik, Adi Daivik, Adi Atmik kleshas or miseries. Who is not elated when happiness is manifest, and he's not distressed from the difficulties of life. It's called a sage of steady mind, a sage of steady mind. Then Krishna continues, he who is without attachment, who does not rejoice when he obtains good or lament when he obtains evil, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. So this is Sounds pretty interesting. And now the practical application of this, Krishna is giving very detailed way in this verse. So we're going to do two texts today, chapter 2, text 58 and 59, because they're very correlated. So first verse. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Text 58. Yada samharate chayam kurmon ghaniva sarvashaha indriyan indriyartebhyas tasya prajna pratishtita. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. One who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects, as the tortoise draws his limbs within the shell, is to be understood as truly situated in knowledge. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The test of a yogi, devotee, or self-realized soul is that he is able to control the senses according to his plan. Most people, however, are servants of the senses and are thus directed by the dictation of the senses. That is the answer to the question as to how the yogi is situated. The senses are compared to venomous serpents. They want to act very loosely and without restriction. The yogi or the devotee must be very strong to control the serpents, like a snake charmer. He never allows them to act independently. There are many injunctions in the revealed scriptures. Some of them are do nots and some of them are do's. Unless one is able to follow the do's and the do nots, restricting oneself from sense enjoyment, it is not possible to be firmly fixed in Krishna consciousness. The best example set herein is the tortoise. The tortoise can at any moment wind up his senses and exhibit them again at any time for particular purposes. Similarly, the senses of the Krishna conscious person are used only for some particular purpose in the service of the Lord and are withdrawn otherwise. Keeping the senses always in the service of the Lord is the example set by the analogy of the tortoise, who keeps the senses within. Om Magana Timarandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto my spiritual master, who is forcing me to open my eyes with the torchlight of transcendental knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto his lotus feet. One who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects, as the tortoise draws his limbs within the shell, is to be understood as truly situated in knowledge. So this is the test of a devotee or self-realized personality, that he is able to control the senses instead of being controlled by the senses. So this is quite a challenge, quite a task. You could say it's a lifetime's work, in that we are embodied souls and we are being gifted the senses and the mind, and the sense objects are there. So how to take control again of the very difficult to control senses, which are compared to venomous serpents. So we have to become a bit of a snake charmer, saying the yogi or the devotee must be very strong to control the sense, like a snake charmer. So it's a very good comparison as well. The idea of a snake charmer. He's very clever. So controlling the senses requires to be very clever, when to like the tortoise, the example is given to allow the senses to connect to the sense objects, because as long as we're embodied, there has to be a certain amount of sense gratification, eating and sleeping and mating and defending and so on. It's all there, and it cannot be, is the word abnegated? Not sure, maybe it's the wrong word. Yeah, we cannot avoid those things, but the science of bhakti is how to utilize those things. Now we talk about the jnanis and the yogis, and they are very austerely performing penance and austerities to rise above the sensual platform, to bring the senses under control. But we understand aruru kritrena param padam tada padanti ada anudrita yusmadangraya. The verse is very famous in the Srimad Bhagavatam, says that although these personalities are performing great tapasya and austerities to attain this position of liberation from sense activities, the intelligence remains abhishuddha buddhaya. The intelligence is not shuddha or pure. It's still contaminated with the desire for mystic perfection, with the desire for gyan or knowledge, to be established in knowledge. And there's a neglect to come and take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. So therefore, they still have a personal desire to be known as a great philosopher, a great yogi. But the Krishna Bhakta is described in a different way in Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Bhukti Mukti Siddhi Kami, Sakali Ashanta. So the Bhukti and the Siddhi, the sense enjoyer, the Bhukti Siddhi, the person desiring mystic perfection through yoga practice, the Jnani, they're all desirous of something. But the actual Krishna Bhakta is not desirous of anything. So when the qualifying word is actual Krishna Bhakta, we are aspiring Krishna Bhaktas, and we are trying to learn this process, how to take shelter of the Lord, because throughout Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is saying that the only, ultimately the way to know me is through devotional service, not by the other processes. You will not come to know me. You may become detached from the material senses and body. You may become go beyond the humdrum of material life. That may be able to be done, but you will not be able to gain the ultimate reinstatement into the Lord's service, which is the ultimate liberation. So Jivara Swarupai, famous verse, Nichara Krishnadas, Krishnara Tatasta Shakti Beda Beda Prakash. That is the actual eternal position or identity of the living entity. We are meant for Krishna's service. We are meant to bring pleasure to Krishna in a reciprocation of loving exchange. So this is the idea. So to be able to withdraw his senses from sense objects, as a tortoise draws his limbs within the shell. So what we've just been discussing there is that there has to be a higher taste. So that's going to be explained in this next verse, which we're going to cover today too. So we'll read the next verse and then we can discuss them together. So text number 59 goes on to say that Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehina rasavarjam rasopyasya param dristvanavartate. So this is a very famous verse of Bhagavad Gita. And it says that the embodied soul, that's you and I, may be restricted from sense enjoyment, though the taste for sense objects remains. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he's fixed in consciousness. So this is such a crucial verse of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada's purport. Unless one is transcendently situated, it is not possible to cease from sense enjoyment. Short sentence, but it says it all. Say it once more. Unless one is transcendently situated, it is not possible to cease from sense enjoyment. The process of restriction from sense enjoyment by rules and regulations is something like restricting a diseased person from certain types of eatables. The patient, however, neither likes such restrictions nor loses his taste for eatables. Similarly, sense restriction by some spiritual process like the Astanga Yoga in the matter of yama, niyama, asana, pranayam, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, etc., is recommended for less intelligent persons who have no better knowledge. So Prabhupada's not saying that they're foolish persons in one sense. He's saying they're less intelligent. Less intelligent doesn't mean that they're fools, but they're not quite as intelligent as the bhakti yogi. The real devotee of the Lord is the most intelligent. And then again, we pinch ourselves and we think, well, is that me? No, we're trying to rekindle our intelligence. We are aspiring devotees, but the actual bhakti yogi is the most intelligent. So we're trying to get that idea through. And Srila Prabhupada would ask his disciples that, are you convinced? And devotees we would say, or I didn't say per se, but we all would think, yes, Prabhupada, we were not very convincing. So we were a little bit convinced, but Srila Prabhupada, as I mentioned, was showing the example of one who's completely convinced without any shadow of doubt, because he's completely washed away all these possible doubts and is fully established in truth. So, continue. It's recommended for less intelligent persons who have no better knowledge, but one who has tasted the beauty of the Supreme Lord Krishna in the course of his advancement in Krishna consciousness, no longer has a taste for dead material things. So this is the pratyaksha, the direct perception of what is fact from illusion. Therefore, restrictions are for the less intelligent neophytes in the spiritual advancement of life. But such restrictions are only good if one actually has a taste for Krishna consciousness. When one is actually Krishna conscious, he automatically loses his taste for pale things. So, one automatically loses his taste for pale things. So where to begin with this? We were listening last night a little to a beautiful lecture Srila Prabhupada was chanting kirtan a lot, and then he spoke, and then again kirtan, and I think it was 1973 in New York, and just watching Srila Prabhupada, his movements, somebody else was leading the kirtan. He had one voice singing, and we were just commenting, discussing with my wife Vimala that how beautiful those kirtans were. And Srila Prabhupada was guiding at one point. He said, who's so swift with the kartals? So somebody began playing kartals and to accompany this devotee, but Srila Prabhupada immediately picked up that says, who's so swift with the kartals? So, and then he said, the idea is that the instruments should be played in accordance with the singer. That's what Srila Prabhupada said. So one should learn that art of allowing the person who's singing to lead the kirtan. And Prabhupada said, not that the singer should follow you playing the drum or you playing the kartals, but actually it's to support the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So that is the singing of the transcendental sound vibration. And Srila Prabhupada was showing by his beautiful presence how to be present in such a kirtan. So the devotee was chanting and Prabhupada was singing in response to the devotees leading of the kirtan. And it was very beautiful, and we were just commenting how nice it was that the main feature actually was the very melodious chanting of Hare Krishna, and then Srila Prabhupada himself, towards the end of that part of the kirtan, he began to speed it up, and then everyone picked up that mood from Prabhupada that it can be lively and very lively. And Prabhupada was really going on his cartels, and showing a very wonderful example of how to chant and get this higher taste from Krishna consciousness through the chanting of Hare Krishna. I'll just go there a little bit because Srila Prabhupada was speaking, and he was speaking from Srimad Bhagavatam, and it was from the section of the prayers of Queen Kunti, and he made this other very nice, so many nice things. He was explaining that the Bhagavatam is for the Paramahamsas, and that was, Queen Kunti was saying that this knowledge is only able to be understood. You, my Lord, are only understandable by these great souls, these great rishis and devotees, and as lower persons, she says, the woman class, how can we possibly understand you? And Srila Prabhupada pointed out in his presentation, he says that the real Paramahamsa leaves aside the material aspect of our life and focuses completely on the spiritual side of life. And he said, he's saying that Srimati Kunti Devi, she is also such Paramahamsa. He said, but she maintained a very humble position. And he said that is the qualification for perfection in devotional life, is to always remain humble. Then he quoted Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Trinadapi Sinichena Tarori Vasahishnana, that we should think ourselves always lower than the straw on the street. We should be more tolerant than a tree, be ready to give all respect to others and not expect and require respect for ourselves. So he showed, he said Queen Kunti was actually the Lord. Prabhupada said the Lord would touch her feet because she was in the superior position socially, because she was Krishna's aunt and elder, and therefore Lord Krishna would come and touch her feet. And so how exalted is that? But even though that was the case, she would always consider herself as very fallen and subservient to Krishna, because she knew Krishna was not just her nephew, but Krishna was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But she presented herself in such a humble way. And Prabhupada quoted the verse, Yehi Sams, Yehi, what is that? Yehi Partadipashrita, Yepishu Papayona Yastriya Vaishas Tatasudras Tepi Yanti Param Gitim, that everyone can approach the supreme destination, whether you're a woman, and then Prabhupada elaborated, he said that when we talk of woman, he said we're talking of material, we're not talking of the ladies in Krishna consciousness. Anyone who's in quote unquote Krishna consciousness, real Krishna consciousness, is a Vaishya, a Shudra, a Kshatriya or Brahmana, a Grihastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyasi, man, woman, whatever. But this is transcendental consciousness. And the Paramahamsa is the word, and Srila Prabhupada explained that also very nicely, saying that the Paramahamsa is said to have the ability to extract milk from a mixture of both milk and water. So if there's milk in a reservoir of water, the swan is able to take the milk and leave the water. So that is the ability of one who's actually situated beyond the sense objects and the sense indulgence in the material world, and is able to do that and only utilizes the senses, just like the tortoise. If it is for Krishna's service, if it is to maintain this body, to facilitate the service to Krishna, then the senses can be utilized. If it's not, then the senses to be withdrawn, and then they're needed, and then they're not needed. And that way the senses can be used. So this is something that has to be learned. And And Srila Prabhupada says in that part of the second, the text 59, the purport, that the person who's restricted, the diseased person, so the patient, however, neither likes such restrictions nor loses his taste for eatables. So the desire for sense objects may remain, but ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste. One example we all use, or I've used many times, is the example of a child, for example. So a child may be seen in the roadside or in the gutter often. Sometimes it can be just at the edge of the pavement, and they get close to the road and there's all sorts of rubbishy bits and pieces and dust and debris just there. So the child could be there unsupervised for some time, and they're playing there. They've got a few sticks and a little bit of dust, and they've created something in their imagination to play with. And the mother or father may come and say, "Come on, don't play there. You have to get out of there." But the child immediately will cry because that's been their play. They're getting some pleasure there. But if the mother or father brings along some rasgulla or some piece of cake or whatever it may be of a higher nature and says, "Oh, would you like some of this?" Then the children immediately, "Oh, yeah." And the attention goes to a higher taste. So one can easily give up the lower taste, playing with little bits and pieces in the gutter, to take the higher, which is a sweetmeat of some kind. So it's not a difficult thing. So this is the idea, is that we have to relish a higher taste. And that is the whole process of sense enjoyment. And it's possible because it means we have to control the mind. Arjuna later on, he says that this is very difficult to control the mind. I think it's like controlling the wind. And Krishna's response, some say, Mahabaho, oh mighty armed Arjuna. He appeals to his greatness and says, "Oh mighty armed Arjuna, it is undoubtedly difficult to control the mind," which includes the senses, the six senses, which includes the mind. It is undoubtedly very difficult. And we think, yes, it's really difficult. But it is possible, Krishna's response. He goes on to say, but it is possible by constant practice and detachment. Two things. We are learning how to practice and learning the art of detaching, just like the tortoise, being able to see that this is not favorable, accepting those things which are favorable and rejecting things which are not so favorable. And that shows up in every aspect of our life. Who we associate with, we have to see what does it bring from that association. Is it keeping my Krishna consciousness stable? Is it increasing my Krishna consciousness, or is it detrimental to my Krishna consciousness? Am I finding that I'm associating in certain environments that are not so favorable? This food, is this favorable or unfavorable? This place that I go to, is it favorable or unfavorable? So every aspect of our life, again, we're learning and practicing how to see what is favorable and unfavorable, and accepting and rejecting accordingly. So this process, it seems, is meant for the brahmanas, and that is the idea, to come out of mundane consciousness, to come to the Brahman platform. Vadanti tattva viras tattvam yajganam advayam brahmatis paramatmati bhagavanati. So it's all Brahman. Arjuna says to Krishna that Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, you are the supreme Brahman. You are the personal God originally, etc. So you are the supreme Brahman. So we have to, we want to come to that platform of being established in spiritual existence. We may not function, we may function in any, this is the Vaishnava. We are aspiring Vaishnavas, and we can do anything for the service of the Lord, in the service of the Lord. So we may act as brahmanas, as preachers and pujari, and all the Brahminical type activities, let's say. Or we may act as a manager in Krishna consciousness. We may act as a Vaishya, protecting cows and growing food grains and so on, showing how to live and depend on Krishna through Krishna's energy, the land. It's a very important activity. And the Shudra, so important. If we don't have legs, the body can't move. We're stuck. So the Shudra is so important also. So, I've mentioned this before. Srila Prabhupada, one famous conversations where Srila Prabhupada is explaining all these things about Varnashram, and the devotees were trying to understand it, and they were saying, oh, so yes, there's Brahmana Vaishnavas, and there's Kshatriya Vaishnavas, and there's Vaishya Vaishnavas, and there's Shudra Vaishnavas. And Srila Prabhupada was not impressed. He said, no, you're not understanding. Vaishnava, there's no such thing as a Shudra Vaishnava. He's a Vaishnava, but he may act for the management and proper functioning of whatever the community and society. He may act in the capacity of Shudra. He may take up that activity. Someone may take up the activity of managing. Someone may take up the activity of preaching. But Vaishnava is Vaishnava. Kulavetra Shritar, he was just selling a few banana plates. Lord Chaitanya associated with him constantly as a young person. He would go there and bewilder Kulavetra Shritar. He would say to him, why you're asking so much for these banana plates and cups? Give me them for this price. And he was so enchanted by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Kulavetra Shritar, he would say, please take whatever you want. I can't, what would you say? You win. Lord Chaitanya was so expert in everything. So but the point I'm making is that Lord Chaitanya was associating with someone who was just selling a few leaf cups. He had grihastas in his as his followers. He had sannyas renunciates, and he is famous. Lord Chaitanya says, I am Gopi Parthu Padakamala Yor Dasa Dasa Anudas. I'm not a Vaishya, I'm not a Shudra, I'm not a Kshatriya Vaishya, neither am I Grihasta Brahmachari, any of these designations. But I'm eternally the servant of the servant of the servant of the eternally self-manifesting ocean of nectar of the highest bliss, the master of the gopis, Lord Sri Krishna. So this process then can be taken up in any way by anyone if we can simply hear from the pure devotee, like Srila Prabhupada, the Supreme Lord himself, in the pages of this Bhagavad Gita, is saying, pick it up. Doesn't matter what position you're in. Pick up this. You've strayed for so long. Now you have this opportunity. Take it, whatever situation you're in, and learn. And you can do it. You can do it by constant practice and by detachment. And also by hearing. We have to hear, touch, now hear from me. How by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt, just by hearing me. And then Krishna is saying, so here I am, so here he is, and he's speaking to us through the pages of Bhagavad Gita. And he's saying, this is how you can do it. Even if you're a woman, even if you're a Vaishya or a Shudra, you may not be the most whatever. You can pick it up. You can take shelter. Whoever takes shelter of me can attain that supreme abode. Oh, me, yes, me, you, me, everyone. We can all do it, and it can all be done through this process of bhakti yoga by learning how to control the sense objects and learning how to experience a higher taste. Now that's worth exploring a little further. The higher taste idea. We've all experienced a higher taste. There's no way you could put on bed sheets and put tilak on your face and shave your head, or if you're a lady, put on a sari and cover your head and put little dots on your forehead and transform from being a Western lady to a apparently Indian style lady or whatever, um, uh, unless we were getting a higher taste. Now, Maya's job is to see how sincere we are. That's the business of Maya, to see if we're actually, and again, I'm listening to Prabhupada last night, he was speaking about that. That is Maya's business, is to see how sincere we are. If we have come just to give disturbance to Krishna, or are we actually ready to serve Krishna? Not that we want, to challenge Krishna or to get some higher position through worshipping Krishna, etc. There's so many things. So, so this higher taste, we've all gained that higher taste. Now, again, we understand to create something is a little difficult. To destroy it is very easy, and to maintain it is the most difficult. Lord Vishnu is in charge of the maintenance. Lord Brahma is creation. Lord Shiva is to destroy, destruct. Yeah. So the most difficult is to maintain, although it doesn't appear that it's that difficult. It seems, well, why is that so difficult? Surely destroying everything requires a lot of strength and stuff. And to create something requires a lot of intelligence and endeavor and so on. But to maintain it is the real challenge, because the time element is at work. So we get our realizations, we get our inspirations, we get a higher taste. And we think, yes, let me chant Hare Krishna. Let me follow the regulative principles. Let me only eat Krishna Prasadam. Let me not go to places where there's mundane activity. And this way we have a great inspiration from the process of Krishna consciousness, that we voluntarily take on these restrictions and to gain further on this higher taste. So Maya's job is to test us, and we can easily forget. That's why Krishna says that we have to repeatedly hear Nasta Prayashu Abhadrashu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. We have to hear. Again, you've heard this so many times that that's okay, because we got to keep hearing it. We take our bath. How many days in a week do we take a bath? 7. At least once each day, maybe twice or 3 times a day. Why? Because there's a tendency to get quote unquote muchi, or not clean, to get dirty, contaminated, going to pass here and going there and doing this, and maybe having to touch little animals or whatever it may be. We become contaminated, not completely pure. So you have to take the bath. So, and wash the teeth and the mouth and like that. So that's it. And we can't complain, oh, I did this yesterday. I've been doing this for years. Surely I can not take a bath today. No, you have to take the bath each day just to remain pure. So in a similar way, we have to be attentive to fan the taste, the higher taste, the param drishva, by experiencing nivarta taste, param, far superior. So we have to be reminded, we have to be redirected, we have to keep on track and not get off track, because that's the nature of the world that we live in. It's easy to get off track. So we can refortify our consciousness by remembering, yes, I do have a higher taste. It may be a little covered over right now. So what do I have to do here? What do I have to do to revive that higher taste? So, and that's introspection. Again, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is a wonderful personality to assist us in this path of devotional service. He was always saying that the aspiring devotee should always be introspective to see what is required. It's such a task, isn't it? To come out. You know, we know the story from Mahabharata. Abhimanyu was able to penetrate at a very young age. He was just a young man, boy, kind of, but man, powerful, but still very young. So he was able to, he knew the art of going into the phalanx and breaking through the enemy's strategies, but he had not learned fully the art of coming out. He knew the art, but didn't know it fully. And when he was surrounded by so many generals who unfairly surrounded, he was unable to come out. So coming out of this phalanx, this forest of material enjoyment, is not such an easy thing. It will require a lot of practice and detachment. So we need to see that actually, yes, there are so many realizations I've had, so many inspirations I've had, so many ecstasies I've had, and this, whatever situation we may be in, we know matra sparshastikantaya sitoshna sukadukada agama paino nityastams tatiksha shasvabarata. The non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of the winter and summer seasons. One has to learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So it's going to happen. Guess what? Happiness and distress is always going to be there. The attraction to the senses is always going to be there. That's the place we are in. This is the body we have. This is the mind and intellect that we've been given, whatever faculties we have, and we practice the process in the association of those who are also practicing the process. And Krishna explains that we will remain fixed in consciousness if we experience the higher taste. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, yes, make adjustments. And I quote this often. Forgive me if you heard it too many times, but Bhaktivinoda is said that unless you're a Paramahamsa, since we did mention Queen Kunti was speaking in that lecture that Srila Prabhupada was speaking from last night that we watched, talking about the Paramahamsa. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, unless you're a Paramahamsa, then you must look after four. Just to give us some idea, this is just one little part of this subject, but you have to look after four aspects of life. Otherwise, you will have difficulty. So the first one is health. One has to look after one's health, and we see that. There's a nice book that I was looking at. Somebody let me borrow it. Prabhupada always, or very much always said, I hope this meets you in good health. And he explained that it is such an important aspect is to have health, because if you don't have health, you cannot execute devotional service practically, in a practical sense. So Bhaktivinoda says one has to take care of his health in a proper way. The next one is proper mental stimulation. The mind has to be engaged in a way that is giving some inspiration, some enthusiasm, something that feels that this is, I like to do this. This might be good in my Krishna consciousness and my activities. So he says proper mental stimulus. That doesn't mean agitating, mentally stimulating. No, but proper stimulus that will keep the mind satisfied. Yeah, I like doing this service. I like associating here. I like to do this for Krishna. So we should be trying to feel a sense of positivity around our activities and our, like that. So health, proper mental stimulation so that one is inspired, and then socially well situated. One has to be properly situated as a brahmachari, or if that is suitable, or as a grihasta, and properly situated there. That means you have to look at, so it's a bit more complicated. Brahmachari is relatively simple. A few other brahmacharis to interact with, a few other people in the world a little bit, just Guru and Krishna. So it's somewhat simplified. I think the Maharaj mentions that it's the cheap. It's not an expensive ashram. You don't have a lot of complication, without going into the whole discussion. So there's not a lot of complication generally. So you can keep it pretty simple. In Grihastha ashram, a lot more complicated. Because why? Because you have another person that you're with, and there'll be children, and then there's in-laws, and then there's relatives, and there's all kinds of complication in the social interactions. But if one is a grihastha, then he has to take care of those things. So he has to do that, keep his good health, make sure the mind is balanced in all of this. So yeah. And then to be socially properly situated, taking care of all those things. And if he's just doing all those three and he's forgetting the fourth one, he's in trouble. Why? Because the fourth one is the sadhana, the study of Shastra, the execution of devotional activities meant to elevate the living entity to the highest level of Krishna consciousness. So all four must be there. It's funny, we say sometimes, sometimes you hear, oh, you've got to keep your health. Then we can get off on a health trip. We can get, yes, I need this, I need that, I need this for my health, my body, I have to have this thing and that thing and this. Yeah, you get the story. So no, that's not what Bhaktivinoda's encouraging. He's not saying that. You have to have all four. So you have to be active in your spiritual stuff, looking after your health. You get the message. So all four have to be there. Pardon me. So this is the very wonderful process, and we did mention also this subject that it's Bhaktivinoda Bhajan, and one of the Sura Bhaktivinoda, I think it is, the verse 5 and 7, he mentions the prasadam, as the devotees like to take the prasadam, and he also mentions specifically Lord Chaitanya's favorite was shak, the different kinds of green vegetables like spinach type preparations, but there's so many varieties, and it was Lord Chaitanya really liked the shaks. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying like that I'm very happy, I'm in ecstasy taking these prasad, different kinds of prasad like that. So it's not that he's into sense enjoyment, but everything is connected to Krishna, and it's not a dry life. It's not a dry life of renunciation, but it is a life full of celebration and beauty and music and it's a very essentially full existence, all in relationship to Krishna, because the spiritual world is not void. It is not devoid of variegatedness and beauty and culture and all these wonderful things. We can hardly imagine if in this world, when we see a beautiful cultural arrangement, it's very satisfying to the soul, proper etiquette, proper interaction, loving exchanges. It's very, very beautiful. If we get a chance to taste that, and what to speak of the spiritual world, it doesn't make any logical sense that it's going to be devoid of everything. And it's actually that pleasure of all the things that I just mentioned is multiplied 1,000,000 times in the spiritual world. Every step is a dance. Every word is a song. So that is the place that we want to go to as Yanti Param Gatim. Sriya Vaishya Tata Sudras Tepi Yanti Param Gatim, the supreme abode, which we all can approach. We hear that the devotee sees with equal vision the elephant, the cow, the dog eater, and even the ant. Yeah. So we were just talking about that the other day, that how amazing it is that again, Srila Prabhupada saying, let the ants, let them have some situation. Give them a little prasad. Let them hear the kirtan. Let them hear all the living entities. Because guess what? It's quite amazing. We had those little bodies, and those little bodies are no different than us. They're spirit souls. That little ant, and there's little generator in there. And it's the little 1/10,000th the size of the tip of the hair, and he's got his desires. There's a queen ant and a king ant. There's the workers, and they've got a plan, and they're doing everything that we are doing. So we should care. We should actually, not to be obsessed on, but we could realize, if we could realize that actually everyone has that relationship with the Supreme Personality dependent. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm not, because I was going in a certain direction, but I want the way to remove the weight. So in the practice of this system of trying to control the senses and always gaining a higher taste, which will give us the inspiration to continue in devotional service. There's a nice one that I mentioned, I think maybe even last week. I think, I can't remember the name of the devotees, but it was a very nice quote. He said that the way to remove the weeds of material desires from your heart is to fill up the garden of your heart with the flowers of bhakti. It's such a nice quote, because those weeds are always going to be there coming up. If you water any garden, you're going to find that there's going to be want to grow and the things that you don't want to grow. So the watering process means it waters everything. So in a similar way, in the garden of our heart, the weeds are going to grow also. And we see that. That's our experience. So how to get rid of it? One is to pull them up, which is also a good idea. And the other one is to plant lots of flowers of bhakti in our hearts, so that there's not so many weeds, because pulling weeds isn't such a joyful thing. And after a while, if you're just pulling weeds all the time, you might want to give up. So the better idea is to plant flowers of bhakti in our hearts, so that the garden's full of flowers and we think, yes, this is what we want. This is what I want, this higher taste in Krishna consciousness. So I think we're going to finish at that point, and we will continue from the text number 60 in our next presentation. Wow. We hear about the senses are so strong. Anyway, we won't go there just now. And Krishna is constantly giving us, he's constantly presenting the challenge that we are faced with. In response to Arjuna, how does this person act, and so on. And then he's saying that these are the difficulties that the great personalities face, and here's how to deal with the difficulties and move beyond them, and to strengthen one's resolve and ability to go further on the path, and to gain the shelter of the Supreme Lord. Okay, so we're going to finish there. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Gaura Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Krishna, Hare Krishna.